The immigrant loses wallet, finds it returned with a note that changes their destiny. This thought had never crossed Amara Okafor's mind when she'd stepped off the plane 3 months ago, clutching her single suitcase and a heart full of tentative hope. The February wind cut through her thin jacket as she hurried down the sidewalk, her shoulders hunched against the biting cold that still felt foreign after 27 years in Lagos. 3 months in America, and winter still shocked her system every morning. The medical assistant position at the community clinic paid barely enough for her studio apartment and essentials, leaving nothing for the proper winter coat she desperately needed. Amara's fingers trembled as she dug into her pocket for bus fare. Empty. She tried the other pocket. Also empty. A jolt of panic shot through her chest as she patted her other pockets frantically, her breath coming faster, forming small clouds in the frigid air. "No, no, no," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. Her wallet was gone, the small, worn leather billfold containing her last $43, her work ID, her temporary resident card, and the only photo she had of her late mother. Amara closed her eyes, mentally retracing her steps. The convenience store where she'd bought a single banana and cup of yogurt for breakfast, the crowded bus where she'd been pressed against other commuters, the short walk to the clinic where she'd stopped to help an elderly man who had slipped on a patch of ice. A tear slipped down her cheek, instantly cold against her skin. She couldn't afford to replace her ID, couldn't afford to miss work searching for a wallet that was likely already emptied and discarded, couldn't bear to lose that photo, the last tangible connection to the woman whose sacrifice had made this new life possible. "You okay, miss?" A deep voice startled her. Amara looked up to see a bus driver watching her with concern from his open door. She hadn't even noticed the bus pulling up. Her voice cracked. "I lost my wallet. I can't pay." The driver's face softened. "Hop on anyway. It's too cold to be standing out here." That small kindness nearly broke her. Amara nodded gratefully and climbed aboard, finding a seat near the back where she could compose herself. The bus lurched forward, carrying her toward another day of struggle in a country that still didn't feel like home. The community clinic was housed in a converted Victorian home in one of the city's transitional neighborhoods. Despite its peeling paint and creaking floors, the place had a warmth that came from the staff's dedication rather than the building's inadequate heating system. "Morning, Amara," called Nancy, the receptionist whose silver-streaked hair and permanent smile had been Amara's first welcome 3 months ago. "You look like you've seen a ghost, honey." Amara tried to return the smile but couldn't quite manage it. "I lost my wallet this morning. Everything was in it. My money, my ID, everything." Nancy's face fell. "Oh, sweetie. Did you file a police report?" "Not yet. I couldn't be late again." "Doctor." Martin had been understanding about her occasional tardiness as she adjusted to the city's transit system, but his patience was wearing thin. "Go do that on your lunch break. I'll cover for you," Nancy said, squeezing her hand. "And don't worry too much. People around here are better than you might think." Amara nodded, though she didn't share Nancy's optimism. Her experience had taught her that kindness was rare and often came with hidden costs. The morning passed in a blur of patient intake forms, temperature readings, and blood pressure checks. Amara moved mechanically through her tasks, her mind circling back to the missing wallet and what it would cost to replace everything, money she simply didn't have. At lunch, she sat alone in the break room, too preoccupied to join the usual chatter. Her stomach growled, but she had no money for the sandwich shop across the street. The banana and yogurt from morning seemed a distant memory. "Amara? Doctor?" Martin's voice startled her from her thoughts. The tall, bearded physician stood in the doorway, his usual stern expression softened slightly. "Nancy mentioned your wallet. Take the afternoon off to sort things out." "But my shift." "We'll manage. Your documentation is more important." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "And take this." He handed her a $20 bill. "Pay me back when you can." Amara stared at the money, pride warring with necessity. "Thank you," she finally said, accepting both the bill and the rare afternoon off. The police station was cold and impersonal, the process of reporting her lost wallet mechanical and offering little hope. The officer barely looked up from his computer as he took her information. "Chances are slim we'll recover it intact, ma'am," he said, finally meeting her eyes with practiced sympathy. "Especially the cash. But we'll put it in the system." Amara nodded, having expected nothing more. She used a portion of Dr. Martin's $20 to pay for a simple lunch and bus fare home, saving the rest for tomorrow's essentials. Her studio apartment was barely more than a converted garage behind a larger house, but it was clean and private. Amara unlocked the door, stepped inside, and finally allowed her shoulders to drop, the mask of composure slipping away in the safety of solitude. The small space held few possessions: a futon that doubled as her bed, a wobbly table with one chair, a hot plate, and a mini fridge. The walls were bare except for a calendar where she marked off days until her next paycheck, and a hand-drawn map of her neighborhood with important locations circled in red pen. Amara sank onto the futon and finally let the tears come, not just for the wallet, but for everything. For the mother who had worked herself to death paying for Amara's education. For the promising nursing career she'd left behind when her visa to study advanced medicine in America had finally been approved. For the crushing loneliness of being a foreigner in a vast, cold city where people rarely met her eyes. When the tears subsided, she made herself a cup of tea and planned her next steps. Tomorrow she would begin the process of replacing her ID. She would need to be even more careful with money until next payday. She would survive this setback, as she had survived everything else. With this fragile resolve, she finally fell into an exhausted sleep, fully clothed atop her futon. A sharp knock at her door jolted Amara awake. Sunlight streamed through her small window, and she realized with horror that she had slept through her alarm. It was morning already. The knocking came again, more insistent. Heart pounding, she stumbled to the door. Had Dr. Martin come to fire her personally for not showing up? She opened the door to find her landlady, Mrs. Chen, a tiny woman in her 70s with a perpetual expression of mild concern. "Package for you," Mrs. Chen said, holding out a padded envelope. "Man leave at my door this morning." Very polite. "For me?" Amara blinked in confusion. She never received mail except bills. Yes. Your name." Mrs. Chen pointed to the envelope where Amara Okafor was written in neat block letters. No address, no return information. "Thank you," Amara said, taking the envelope. It was lightweight but contained something solid. Mrs. Chen lingered, curiosity evident. "Good news, I hope." "I'm not sure. I wasn't expecting anything." Amara forced a smile. "What time is it?" "I think I overslept." "Almost 9. You sick?" "No, just yesterday was difficult. I should call work." Mrs. Chen nodded and finally retreated, leaving Amara alone with the mysterious envelope. She closed the door and turned it over in her hands, her heart beating faster. Who would send her something? How did they know where she lived? With trembling fingers, she tore open the seal and gasped. Her wallet fell into her palm, the worn leather exactly as she remembered it. With disbelief, she opened it to find her ID, her clinic badge, and her mother's photo all intact. But where her $43 had been, she found over $100 in bills and a folded note. The note was handwritten on plain white paper. "Ms. Okafor, I found your wallet yesterday morning on Maple Street. Your clinic ID had your name, but no contact information. I hope you don't mind that I asked around to find you. The extra money is not charity. I saw your nursing certification from Nigeria in your wallet. My mother needs in-home care 3 evenings a week. The agency nurses cost more than I can afford on my teacher's salary. If you're interested in making some extra money, please call me. If not, consider the extra cash payment for your time reading this note. Either way, I believe things happen for a reason. Daniel Warner, 5550187. Amara read the note 3 times, her hand pressed to her mouth. The possibility of extra income was desperately needed, but it was the last line that echoed in her mind. I believe things happen for a reason. Her mother had said the same thing when Amara had been accepted to the American program just weeks before her unexpected death. Everything happens for a reason, my star, she had said, her eyes bright with pride and fever. This is your path. With shaking hands, Amara reached for her phone and dialed the number. Hello? A man's voice answered, deep and slightly distracted. This is Amara Okafor. You ... You found my wallet? There was a pause, then, Ms. Okafor. Yes, I did. I'm Daniel Warner. Thank you for calling. Thank you for returning it. Everything is there, even more than was there before. He laughed, a warm sound that somehow eased the tightness in her chest. Did you read my note? Yes. About your mother. She's recovering from a stroke. Physically, she's improving, but she needs help with medications, exercises, and monitoring her blood pressure. The professional nurses are excellent, but expensive, Amara finished for him. Very. And impersonal. Mom's a retired literature professor. She needs someone to talk to as much as she needs medical care. Amara hesitated. I'm not licensed as a nurse in America yet. I'm working as a medical assistant while I study for the certification exams. That's perfect, actually. We just need someone with medical knowledge who can help with the basics. The doctor visits weekly, but day to day, it's just making sure she takes her medications correctly and does her therapy exercises. Amara calculated quickly. Even a few extra hours of work each week would make a significant difference in her finances. And nursing, real hands-on care, was what she had trained for, what she missed in her current job of paperwork and basic vitals. I would like to meet your mother before deciding, she said carefully. Of course. Are you free this evening? I can pick you up. No, Amara said quickly, then softened her tone. I mean, I can take the bus. Just give me the address. After arranging to meet at 6 that evening, Amara called the clinic to explain her oversleeping. Nancy, bless her, had already covered for her, telling Dr. Martin she had called in sick. With unexpected free time and the relief of having her wallet back, Amara spent the day replacing the food she'd planned to go without and allowing herself a rare indulgence, a proper coffee from a real cafe, where she sat by the window watching people hurry past in the cold. The Warner home was in an older neighborhood of brick townhouses with small, neat front gardens now dormant under winter's grip. Amara checked the address 3 times before climbing the steps to the navy blue door with its brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. Daniel Warner opened the door before she could knock. He was younger than she had imagined, perhaps in his early 30s, with sandy brown hair that fell across his forehead and wire-rimmed glasses that magnified thoughtful gray eyes. He wore a sweater with elbow patches that made him look like a professor himself. Ms. Okafor, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. His handshake was firm but not overpowering, his smile genuine. Amara found herself smiling back despite her nervousness. Please call me Amara. Amara, then. I'm Daniel. Come in, Mom's excited to meet you. The house was warm and smelled of books and something baking. Cinnamon, maybe. It was cluttered in a comfortable way, with bookshelves lining every available wall and soft lighting that created pools of amber among the shadows. In the living room, a white-haired woman sat in a recliner near a gas fireplace, a colorful Afghan across her lap despite the room's warmth. Her left side seemed slightly wilted, the arm and leg positioned carefully with pillows, but her eyes were bright and alert in a face mapped with lines of both laughter and pain. Mom, this is Amara Okafor, Daniel said, his voice softening. Amara, my mother, Elizabeth Warner. Please, it's Liz, the older woman said, her speech slightly slurred but perfectly understandable. Only my students called me Elizabeth, and that was to my face. Heaven knows what they called me behind my back. Amara laughed despite herself. It's a pleasure to meet you, Liz. Sit, sit. Liz gestured to a nearby armchair. Danny, get the poor girl some tea. She's half frozen. Daniel obediently disappeared toward what Amara assumed was the kitchen, leaving her alone with his mother. So, Liz said, studying her with unabashed interest. Nigeria, Danny tells me. Where exactly? Lagos, Amara replied. But my family originally came from a small village near Enugu. Fascinating. I had a colleague who studied Igbo literature. Brilliant woman. Liz shifted slightly, wincing. Damn leg never gets comfortable anymore. The stroke took my left side 3 months ago. Doctors say I'm recovering well, but well is relative when you're 74. Amara nodded sympathetically. May I? She asked, gesturing toward Liz's positioned leg. At Liz's nod, Amara knelt and gently adjusted the pillows supporting the older woman's leg, drawing on her training. The alignment affects circulation and comfort. How's that? Liz's eyebrows rose in surprise. Better, actually. Much better. You've done this before. I was a nurse for 5 years in Lagos, specializing in rehabilitation. And now you're taking temperatures at a community clinic. What a waste. Daniel returned with a tray holding 3 mugs of tea and a plate of cookies, just in time to hear his mother's blunt assessment. Mom, please. It's all right, Amara said, accepting a mug with gratitude. The warmth seeped into her cold hands. She's not wrong. But I'm working toward my American certification, which costs money and takes time. Liz nodded knowingly. Meanwhile, my son is offering to pay you under the table to babysit an old woman. Mom! Amara couldn't help laughing at Daniel's mortification. I wouldn't call it babysitting. It's nursing care, and it's exactly what I trained to do. Liz smiled, revealing the woman she must have been before illness etched pain into her features. Direct and diplomatic. I like her, Danny. Daniel shook his head, but Amara caught the affection in his exasperation. This was clearly a familiar dynamic between mother and son. The conversation flowed easily after that. Amara explained her background, her journey to America, and her current situation without the self-pity that sometimes crept into her private thoughts. Liz asked perceptive questions, while Daniel mostly listened, occasionally interjecting to redirect his mother when her inquiries became too personal. As they talked, Amara observed the home environment, mentally noting the adaptations already in place for Liz's condition. Grab bars, a walker positioned nearby, a medication organizer on the side table. She also noticed what was missing, the cold efficiency of professional medical care that often stripped away dignity in the name of treatment. By the time she left 2 hours later, Amara had agreed to come 3 evenings a week, from 6 to 9, to help with Liz's evening medications, therapy exercises, and bedtime routine. The pay was fair, more than fair really, and would allow her to start saving for her certification exams instead of merely surviving from paycheck to paycheck. Daniel walked her to the bus stop, insisting despite her protests that it wasn't safe for her to wait alone after dark. "Your mother is remarkable," Amara said as they walked, their breath forming matching clouds in the cold air. "She is," he agreed. "Stubborn as hell, but remarkable." The stroke hit right after she retired. She'd had all these plans: travel, volunteer work, finally writing that book on female poets she's been talking about for decades. The brain is resilient. With proper therapy, she could still do much of that. Daniel glanced at her, hope flickering across his features. "You think so? The doctors have been vaguer." "Doctors sometimes focus on the medical recovery without considering the whole person," Amara said carefully. "Your mother's mind is sharp and she's clearly motivated. That counts for a great deal in recovery." They reached the bus stop, its small shelter offering minimal protection from the wind that had picked up as night deepened. "Thank you for coming tonight," Daniel said, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. "And not just for agreeing to help with Mom, for treating her like a person, not a patient." "Of course. She is a person first." Amara smiled. "A rather intimidating one, actually." Daniel laughed, the sound warm in the cold night. "You passed her test with flying colors. She'll probably have you grading papers by next week." The headlights of the approaching bus illuminated his face, highlighting the kindness in his eyes that Amara had noticed immediately. This was the man who had gone out of his way to return a stranger's wallet, who cared for his mother with obvious devotion, who had somehow recognized what Amara needed most: not charity, but opportunity. "I'm glad you found my wallet," she said impulsively as the bus doors opened. Daniel's smile deepened, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "I'm starting to think it was the other way around. Maybe your wallet found me." The words stayed with Amara long after the bus pulled away, carrying her back to her small apartment that somehow felt less lonely than it had that morning. The next 3 weeks established a new rhythm to Amara's life. Mornings at the clinic, studying during lunch breaks, then 3 evenings a week at the Warner home, working with Liz on her exercises and gradually becoming part of their household routine. Liz proved to be an exacting but appreciative patient, pushing herself hard during therapy sessions and rewarding both herself and Amara with sharp observations about literature, politics, and human nature. She never allowed Amara to treat her as fragile, demanding the same intellectual engagement she would have expected from a colleague. "Tell me about Nigerian literature," she commanded one evening as Amara helped her through a series of hand exercises designed to improve her fine motor skills. "Not what tourists read, but what you grew up with." Amara, surprised and pleased, found herself sharing stories from her childhood, the folk tales her grandmother had told, the poems she'd memorized in school, the modern Nigerian novels her mother had insisted she read to understand her country's complex history. Liz listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions that revealed her academic background. When Amara finished helping her into bed that night, Liz pressed a book into her hands, a collection of poetry by Wole Soyinka. "My personal copy?" Liz said. "I had it signed when he gave a lecture at the university 15 years ago. Read it, then we'll discuss." Daniel, who had been hovering in the doorway, rolled his eyes affectionately. "Mom, Amara doesn't need homework." "Nonsense. Everyone needs poetry." Liz fixed Amara with a stern look. "Especially those far from home." The gift touched Amara deeply. It wasn't just the book itself, but the assumption that their relationship would continue, that discussions would happen, that connections were forming. As the weeks passed, Daniel began lingering during Amara's visits, no longer disappearing to his home office to grade papers after briefly greeting her. Instead, he would work at the dining room table, occasionally joining their conversations or bringing cups of tea without being asked. Sometimes he would read aloud to his mother while Amara organized medications or reviewed Liz's health journal, his voice bringing stories to life with a warmth that made even familiar texts feel new. Amara found herself looking forward to these evenings, not just for the extra income, but for the sense of belonging they provided, something she hadn't experienced since leaving Nigeria. One snowy evening in late March, Amara arrived to find the house unusually quiet. Daniel met her at the door, his face drawn with worry. "Mom's having a bad day," he said quietly. "She tried to write a letter this morning and couldn't form the words properly. It triggered a panic attack and she's been withdrawn since." Amara nodded, understanding immediately. For someone whose identity was so tied to language and intellect, such a setback would be devastating. "Has she taken her medication?" "Yes, but she refused her lunch. Said she wasn't hungry." Amara hung up her coat and went directly to Liz's room, knocking softly before entering. The curtains were drawn, the room dim despite the early hour. Liz lay on her side, facing away from the door. "It's Amara," she said gently. "May I come in?" "If you must." Liz's voice was flat, missing its usual sharpness. Amara moved around the bed to face her. Liz's eyes were open but unfocused, her normally animated face slack with defeat. Rather than immediately launching into their usual routine, Amara sat on the edge of the bed. "Daniel told me you tried writing today." Liz's mouth twisted. "Tried being the operative word? My hand wouldn't cooperate. Chicken scratch, not writing. May I see?" After a moment's hesitation, Liz gestured to the bedside table. Amara picked up the notepad lying there. The attempted letter showed clear effort. The first few words were legible, if shaky, before deteriorating into increasingly uneven scrawls. "This is actually quite good for 3 months post-stroke," Amara said honestly. Liz made a dismissive sound. "Don't patronize me. I'm not. I've worked with many stroke patients. Fine motor skills take time to recover, especially for complex activities like writing." She set the notepad down. "But there are alternatives while you rebuild those skills." "Like what? Having my son write for me like I'm a child? Using one of those text-to-speech programs that makes me sound like a robot? Or dictating to me?" Amara suggested. "Who are you writing to?" Liz sighed, some of the fight leaving her. "My sister in Oregon. We've written weekly letters for 30 years. Emails won't do. Maggie insists on real paper, real ink." "Then let's continue that tradition. You dictate, I'll write. Your words, my handwriting until yours returns." Liz studied her face, searching for pity or condescension. Finding neither, she slowly pushed herself to a sitting position. "You have better things to do than act as my secretary." "Actually, I don't," Amara said with a small smile. "And I'd consider it an honor to help preserve your correspondence with your sister." Something shifted in Liz's expression, a softening, a relinquishing of pride in favor of connection. "Get my stationery from the desk, then. The blue paper, not the cream. And my good pen, the fountain pen in the wooden box." For the next hour, Amara carefully transcribed Liz's dictated letter, a warm, witty account of her recovery that acknowledged her struggles while finding humor in the process. By the time they finished, Liz's voice had regained its usual animation, and she agreed to eat the soup Daniel had prepared hours earlier. As Amara helped Liz to the dinner table, the older woman squeezed her hand with surprising strength. "Thank you for understanding what I needed. You'd do the same for me," Amara replied simply. That night, as Daniel walked her to the bus stop as had become their custom, a light snow fell around them, muffling the city sounds and creating a private world of white. "You were amazing with Mom today," he said. "I've been trying to get her out of that room since this morning. She needed to feel useful, not just cared for," Amara explained. The letter gave her back her voice. They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments, snowflakes catching in their hair and on their shoulders. "Can I ask you something personal?" Daniel finally said. Amara nodded, curious. "Why nursing? You're obviously brilliant. You could have done anything." The question took her by surprise, not because it was invasive, but because no one had asked her that in years. Most people assumed practical reasons: job security, decent pay, clear career path. "My mother," she said after a thoughtful pause. "She fell ill when I was 14. Nothing dramatic. Chronic anemia, joint pain, eventually diagnosed as lupus. But it was the nurse at our local clinic who noticed the pattern when doctors kept dismissing her symptoms as stress or overwork. That nurse gave my mother her dignity when the system tried to take it away. Daniel listened intently, snowflakes melting on his glasses. I wanted to be that person for someone else, Amara continued. The one who sees the whole person, not just the illness. The one who stands between vulnerability and indifference. Like you did for Mom today. Amara shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. It's just my job. No, Daniel said softly. It's who you are. The bus appeared at the end of the street, its headlights cutting through the falling snow. Daniel impulsively reached out and brushed a snowflake from Amara's cheek, his fingers warm against her cold skin. Sorry, he said, withdrawing his hand quickly. I didn't mean to. It's all right, Amara assured him, ignoring the way her heart had accelerated at his touch. The bus pulled up, doors opening with a hydraulic sigh. Amara hesitated, feeling as though something important remained unsaid between them. Amara, Daniel began, then stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. Be careful getting home. She nodded and boarded the bus, looking back to see him standing in the gently falling snow, watching until the bus pulled away. Spring arrived gradually, with tentative buds appearing on trees and daylight stretching longer into the evenings. Liz's recovery continued steadily. She could now walk short distances with just a cane, and her speech had improved enough that strangers no longer noticed the slight slurring that appeared only when she was tired. Amara's routine expanded beyond work and study. She now joined the Warners for Sunday dinners, helped Liz tend the small herb garden Daniel had built on their back patio, and occasionally accompanied them to Liz's favorite bookstore, where the owner greeted her as part of the family. On warm evenings, the three of them would sit on the porch, Liz holding court from her favorite wicker chair, while Amara and Daniel listened to her stories of academic politics and literary feuds. Sometimes Daniel would bring out his guitar, playing folk songs that Liz hummed along to and Amara gradually learned. These moments of belonging were precious to Amara, yet increasingly complicated by her growing awareness of Daniel, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, how his hands moved expressively when he discussed his students, the quiet competence with which he managed both his mother's care and his own career. She caught herself looking for him when she arrived at the house, disappointed on evenings when his work kept him late at school. Daniel, too, seemed increasingly aware of her, finding reasons to touch her arm when making a point, asking her opinion on matters unrelated to his mother's care, sharing books he thought she'd enjoy with personal notes tucked between the pages. Liz watched their cautious dance with knowing eyes but said nothing, though Amara occasionally caught her hiding a smile when Daniel made some particularly transparent excuse to linger during Amara's visits. In April, Amara received notification that her certification exam was scheduled for June. She mentioned it casually during dinner one evening, trying to contain her excitement. That's wonderful news, Liz declared, raising her water glass in a toast. We must celebrate. I haven't passed it yet, Amara reminded her. Details. Liz waved dismissively. You'll pass. You're the most competent person I know, and I spent 40 years surrounded by people with more degrees than sense. Daniel smiled at his mother's confidence. She's right, you know. You've got this. Their faith in her was both heartwarming and terrifying. Success would mean better job opportunities, higher pay, the chance to practice the profession she loved. But it would also mean changes to the comfortable routine they'd established. No more evenings with the Warners, no more walks to the bus stop with Daniel. Later that night, as Daniel walked her out, she voiced this concern. If I pass, I'll need to find a full-time nursing position. I won't be able to continue our arrangement. Daniel stopped walking, turning to face her in the gentle spring evening. Is that what this is to you? An arrangement? The hurt in his voice caught her off guard. No, of course not. You and Liz have become... She paused, searching for the right word. Family, Daniel finished for her. At least that's what you've become to us. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Family. The thing Amara had lost when her mother died. The connection she'd been missing since coming to America. I don't want to lose that, she admitted softly. Daniel took a step closer. Then don't. Pass your exam. Find your nursing job. But don't disappear from our lives. It won't be the same. No, he agreed. It might be better. The unspoken possibility in his words made her heart race. They had been so careful to maintain boundaries, to focus on Liz's care rather than the growing attraction between them. Daniel, I know the timing isn't right, he said quickly. You have your exam to focus on, and I'm your employer, technically, which complicates things. But when that changes, he took a deep breath. I'd like to see where this could go. If you would. Amara looked at him. This kind, thoughtful man who had returned a stranger's wallet and changed the course of her life. Who looked at her and saw not just her competence or her usefulness, but her. I would, she said simply. His smile was like sunrise, gradual and illuminating. Good. That's good. They stood there for a moment, possibilities stretching between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. I should go, Amara finally said, gesturing toward the approaching bus. Daniel nodded, still smiling. I'll see you Friday. Friday, she agreed, the word a promise. As spring deepened into early summer, Amara divided her time between work, studying for her certification exam, and her evenings with the Warners. Daniel kept his word about not complicating things before her exam, though the awareness between them continued to grow, expressed in lingering glances and conversations that stretched late into the evening. Liz, for her part, threw herself into helping Amara study, drilling her on terminology and case studies with the same rigor she had once demanded of her graduate students. Her own recovery continued to improve. She could now write short notes, though longer correspondence still required Amara's help. The night before the exam, Amara arrived at the Warner home to find it decorated with balloons and a hand-painted banner reading, Future RN, in Liz's shaky but determined handwriting. What's all this? She asked, laughing as Daniel ushered her inside. Your victory celebration, Liz announced from her place at the dining table, which was set with their best dishes and a small feast of Amara's favorite foods, including jollof rice that Daniel had apparently learned to make from an online tutorial. The exam is tomorrow, Amara reminded them. I haven't passed yet. Anticipatory celebration, Daniel explained. We figured you'd be too exhausted afterward for a proper party. And we wanted to make sure you know that whatever happens tomorrow, we're proud of you, Liz added. Though you'll pass, of course. The simple declaration of pride brought unexpected tears to Amara's eyes. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. After dinner, Liz presented her with a small gift box. Inside, Amara found a sleek fountain pen, similar to the one Liz treasured. For writing your patient notes, Liz explained. Every professional needs proper tools. Daniel's gift was more practical, a new stethoscope to replace the worn one Amara had brought from Nigeria. I asked Nancy at your clinic which kind was best, he admitted. She says you've been making do with that old one for too long. The thoughtfulness of their gifts, the effort they'd put into the evening, the absolute certainty in their belief in her, it all combined to create a sense of belonging that Amara had stopped hoping for after her mother died. This was what family felt like. That night, Daniel walked her all the way home instead of just to the bus stop, insisting she needed proper rest before the exam. You'll be amazing tomorrow, he said as they reached her door. But even if the impossible happens and you don't pass this time, nothing changes between us. You know that, right? Amara nodded, too full of emotion to speak. Daniel reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Good luck tomorrow, though you don't need it. On impulse, Amara rose on tiptoes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. Thank you. For believing in me? His eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled in a smile that made her heart flutter. Always, he promised. The next day passed in a blur of concentration as Amara worked through the complex certification exam, drawing on both her Nigerian training and her recent intensive study. When she finally emerged from the testing center into the bright June sunshine, exhaustion hit her like a physical wave. She checked her phone to find multiple encouraging texts from Daniel and even one from Liz, who rarely texted due to her still recovering fine motor skills. The messages brought a smile to her tired face as she boarded the bus home. The wait for results would be excruciating, up to 2 weeks she'd been told. But for now, she had done everything she could. 3 days later, Amara was helping Liz with her evening exercises when Daniel burst through the front door, waving an envelope. It came, he announced, breathless as if he'd run all the way from school. Your results! Amara froze, her heart suddenly pounding. Already? They said 2 weeks. Apparently they're efficient. He held out the envelope. It was forwarded from the clinic. Nancy called to tell me it had arrived. Liz straightened in her chair, her therapy momentarily forgotten. Well, open it, girl. Don't keep us in suspense. With trembling fingers, Amara took the envelope. The return address confirmed it was indeed from the certification board. She tore it open, unfolded the letter inside, and scanned for the results. The room blurred as tears filled her eyes. "Amara?" Daniel's voice was anxious. "What does it say?" She looked up, a smile breaking through her tears. "I passed, with distinction." The next moments were a chaos of celebration. Liz struggling to her feet to embrace her, Daniel lifting her off the ground in an exuberant hug, all three of them talking at once. The joy was overwhelming, made sweeter by having people to share it with. When the initial excitement settled, Liz insisted on opening the bottle of champagne she'd been saving for a special occasion. They toasted Amara's success, then Liz's recovery, then simply to the future. As the evening progressed, Liz made a show of yawning dramatically. "Well, this has been lovely, but I'm an old woman who needs her rest. Amara, be a dear and help me to bed. Daniel, you clean up." Daniel rolled his eyes at his mother's transparent maneuver, but began gathering the glasses without protest. After helping Liz with her nighttime routine, Amara found herself lingering in the doorway. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything these past months." Liz smiled, looking more like the formidable professor she'd once been than the patient Amara had first met. "I should be thanking you. You've given me back my independence, my dignity." She paused, eyes twinkling. "And possibly a daughter-in-law if my son ever gets his act together." "Liz!" Amara felt heat rush to her cheeks. "Oh, please. I may be old, but I'm not blind. Just promise me you won't move too far away when you start your fancy nursing job. I still need someone to argue about literature with." Amara's heart swelled with affection for this brilliant, difficult woman who had become so important to her. "I promise." When she returned to the living room, Daniel was waiting. The dishes cleared and the room bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. "Mom asleep?" he asked. "Nearly." She extracted a promise that I wouldn't disappear from her life, even with a new job. Daniel smiled. "She's not the only one hoping for that." The moment stretched between them, full of possibility. The certification had been the final barrier, the last reason to maintain professional distance. "I've been thinking," Daniel said, taking a step closer. "Now that you're officially a certified nurse and no longer technically working for me." "Yes?" Amara's voice was barely above a whisper. "Would you have dinner with me? Not here, not with Mom. Just the two of us." The simple request contained worlds of meaning. This would be a beginning, a deliberate step toward something neither of them had named, but both had felt growing for months. "I'd like that," she said, her heart so full it felt like it might overflow. Daniel's smile was radiant. "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," she agreed. He walked her to the door, both of them suddenly shy despite months of comfortable companionship. At the threshold, he took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I've been waiting to do this for a very long time," he murmured, then leaned down and kissed her softly. The kiss was gentle, a question more than a demand. Amara answered by stepping closer, her free hand finding its way to his shoulder as the kiss deepened into something warm and certain. When they finally parted, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "I think I've been falling in love with you since I found your wallet." The confession, so simply stated, unlocked something in Amara's heart. "And I think finding that note was the beginning of finding my home." 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Amara stood in the garden of the community center where she now worked as a registered nurse, supervising a program for stroke survivors. Beside her, Daniel adjusted his tie nervously, while Liz, elegant in a blue dress that matched her eyes, directed the small group of guests to their seats with all her former professorial authority. The gathering was intimate. Colleagues from the clinic and Daniel's school, Liz's former students, a few neighbors who had become friends, and, most precious of all, Amara's aunt and cousin who had flown in from Nigeria for the occasion. As the simple ceremony began, Amara caught sight of the small table near the flower-decorated arch, where a framed photograph of her mother stood beside one of Daniel's father, present in spirit, witnessing this new beginning. The officiator, a former colleague of Liz's, smiled at the assembled guests. "We are gathered here today to celebrate not just the union of Amara and Daniel, but the remarkable journey that brought them together, a journey that began with a lost wallet and a note that changed both their destinies." Amara looked at Daniel, his eyes shining with the same love and certainty she felt in her own heart. From loss had come finding, from a moment of despair had come the greatest joy she had ever known. As they exchanged their vows, Amara thought of that cold February morning when she had discovered her wallet missing and believed it was yet another setback in a life that seemed determined to challenge her at every turn. She could never have imagined that the loss would lead her here, to belonging, to purpose, to love. Some things truly do happen for a reason. That night at the small reception in the Warner home, soon to be her home too, Amara found a moment alone with Liz, who was watching the celebration with satisfied exhaustion. "Happy?" the older woman asked, patting the seat beside her. "Beyond words," Amara admitted, sitting down. "I never expected any of this when I came to America." Liz nodded thoughtfully. "Life rarely gives us what we expect. Sometimes it gives us exactly what we need instead." She covered Amara's hand with her own. "You were what we needed, my dear. What Daniel needed. What I needed. And you were what I needed," Amara replied. "A family when I thought I'd never have one again." Across the room, Daniel caught her eye and smiled, a private communication that spoke of all they had shared and all that lay ahead. In that smile, Amara saw the future unfolding, a life built on the foundation of a chance encounter, a returned wallet, and a note that had indeed changed her destiny in ways she could never have imagined. Sometimes the things we lose lead us to what we're meant to find.